At Christmas dinner, Dad warned, "Don't you dare cry." And I realized I didn't have to cry there. His fork hovered over the roast potatoes, voice low enough that only I could hear it, but sharp enough to slice through the fake cheer around the table. The fairy lights reflected in his glasses, so I couldn't see his eyes properly, just my own face warped in the lenses. My throat was already tight from swallowing back tears in the hallway, and when he hissed that sentence, something inside me went oddly still. The old reflex flickered, apologize, smile, fix it, but instead I just shifted my napkin onto my lap and stared at the congealing gravy on my plate. The smell of overcooked turkey and scented candles pressed in on me. Mom laughed too loudly at some joke from my uncle, and the sound felt like it was coming from another room. "Did you hear me?" he added without looking up. One corner of his mouth moved, more like a warning than a smile. "I heard you," I said. My voice came out calm, which surprised both of us. My hands, hidden under the tablecloth, gripped the underside of the chair until my fingers ached. I watched the way the tinsel drooped on the mantelpiece, the way the cheap paper crowns sat crooked on everyone's heads. My chest was doing that hummingbird thing it does when I'm about to cry, but underneath, another thought had appeared, clear and quiet. I don't have to cry here. I can just leave. It was our first Christmas back as a family after my divorce. I'm 33F and I signed my papers in July after a 2-year marriage that felt like trying to sleep on a bed of bristles. Never catastrophic enough that anyone else could see why I was exhausted, but sharp enough that I bled a little all the time. When everything finally collapsed, my parents were complicated about it. On the one hand, they were furious at my ex for humiliating me. On the other, they were furious at me for giving up. Dad said more than once, "In our day you worked through your problems." Like cheating and financial manipulation were the same as arguing about who takes the bins out. I hadn't actually planned to be at their house this year. Back in October, I told my mom that I might do something quieter. Maybe stay in the city and have a low-key lunch with friends. She'd immediately gone into Wounded Queen mode. "So I have to tell everyone my newly single daughter is too good for Christmas now?" she'd said. "They'll think we've had some scandal." We had had a scandal, technically. My ex had slept with someone from his gym and then cleared out our joint savings account to take her on holiday. That felt scandalous enough to me. But in my parents' minds, that was secondary to how it made them look. "We'll keep it small this year," Mom promised over the phone. "Just us and maybe your aunt and uncle. It'll be good for you." Family support. Family support in my house usually means pretend nothing's wrong and dress nicely. Still, the part of me that is permanently 12 years old, desperate for approval, said, "Okay, I'll think about it," which my parents heard as, "Yes, absolutely, I'll be there." I drove down on Christmas Eve with a suitcase rattling in the back seat and a knot in my stomach that pulsed every time the GPS counted down the kilometers. I told myself I could leave any time, that I had my own car, my own job, my own apartment now. No one could actually stop me. It felt like repeating instructions in a fire drill. The house was exactly the same and completely different. Same artificial tree we've had since 2004. Same chipped angel on top. Same framed school photos on the wall. But there were new prints too, photos of my brother and his girlfriend on beaches and at fancy restaurants, my parents in matching Christmas sweaters on some over-50s river cruise. None of me and my ex-mom must have taken them down. For a second I felt grateful. Then I realized my college graduation photo had gone too, replaced by one of my brother's dog in a Santa costume. "Look at you," Mom had said when I walked in, eyes sweeping over my body like a scanner. "You're too thin. Are you eating? We'll fatten you up, you'll see." Then, without taking a breath, "Oh, and don't talk about the divorce at dinner. Your cousin's bringing that new boyfriend. We don't want to depress everyone." I wasn't planning to give a TED talk about it, I'd muttered, slipping my shoes off by the door. Dad appeared then, clapping me on the shoulder with more force than necessary. "Our girl's home," he announced, like I was a prodigal son in a parable. "Get that suitcase up to your old room, Em. Your mother's got a list of jobs as long as her arm." She did. Of course she did. Within 20 minutes, I was up a step ladder stringing lights along the front veranda while she shouted adjustments from the garden. Higher. No, not that high, you'll make the gutter sag. Honestly, did you lose all sense when you moved out? There's this thing that happens when I'm back in that house. My adult self, who pays taxes and drives and has left a man who treated her badly, sort of dissolves, and this other version slots in, obedient, hyper-aware of everyone's moods, apologizing for things I didn't do. It's like muscle memory, but for personality. By the time Christmas dinner rolled around the next day, I already felt scraped out. I'd peeled what felt like 1,000 potatoes, made emergency small talk with relatives who said things like, "So, back on the market, hey?" with little winks, and listened to my aunt describe my divorce as that unpleasantness, like it was a plumbing issue. Dad's warning landed in that context. We just sat down, paper hats on, crackers pulled, plates full. Mom insisted I sit at the end of the table for the photos, which also meant directly across from my cousin Sophie, who was 7 months pregnant and glowing in that way people do when everything in their life seems to be going to plan. I'm happy for her, genuinely. I'm also human. When she rested her hand on her belly and her boyfriend kissed her cheek and everyone made those soft, gooey noises, I felt my eyes prick. In that split second, I wasn't thinking about my ex or my empty apartment or anything coherent. Really, it was just this flash of this is not the life I thought I'd have by now, mixed with sensory overload. The scent of cloves, the heat from the oven, the clatter of cutlery, my uncle already on his 3rd beer. Dad must have seen my face change. That's when he leaned in and said, "Don't you dare cry." Not loud enough for the others to hear, but loud enough to slam down on my chest like a lid. He didn't say it kindly. It wasn't, "Please don't cry, they'll feel bad." It was pure control. Crying, to my father, has always been a kind of failure. When I was little and I'd tear up over something, skinned knee, playground insult, his first response was usually, "Oh, come on, you're tougher than that." If I kept crying, he'd sigh and walk away, muttering about crocodile tears. Once, when I was 13 and hormonal and overwhelmed, and I cried at the table because he'd made a comment about my weight in front of relatives. "Better lay off the roast, we don't want you ballooning in high school." He pointed his fork at me and said, "Pack it in. No one wants to see that while they're eating." I wiped my face so fast I scraped my skin, then hid in the bathroom until dessert. The next day he told me I'd spoiled the mood. So sitting there now, 20 years later, hearing the exact same warning at the exact same table, something in me finally clicked. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It was more like realizing a door has been unlocked the whole time. I didn't have to cry there. That thought felt oddly practical, like realizing you can take a different bus route home. I could cry later, in my car, in my own shower, on my friend's couch if I wanted. Or I could not cry at all. But I didn't have to hold the tears in just so he wouldn't be uncomfortable, then punish my own body for reacting like a human. I took a sip of water, felt my heart hammering, and said, "Okay, then I'm going to step outside." Dad frowned, already annoyed. "The food's just been served," he said. "You're not going to go all weird, are you?" All weird, in Dad language, means have any emotion other than cheerfulness. "I'll be back," I said, putting my fork down carefully so it didn't clatter. "I just need some air." Mom looked over, irritation flashing across her face. Honestly, can you not make a scene? We just sat down for one nice." "I'm not making a scene," I said. My voice shook a little, but I kept it low. "I'm going to the bathroom. Keep eating." I stood up. My legs felt strangely light, like when you've been sitting cross-legged too long and your foot falls asleep. No one stopped me because what would they say? "No, you must sit here and be emotionally appropriate to our standards." I walked down the hallway, my paper crown slipping slightly over one eye, and turned left as if heading to the bathroom. Instead of going in, I kept walking, past the laundry to the back door. My heart was pounding in my ears now, but the strange calm hadn't left. The backyard was cool and dim compared to the oven of the dining room. The sky had that hazy orange edge to it the city gets around sunset in summer, when the heat finally gives up a little. I could still hear the muffled clink of cutlery and bursts of laughter through the wall. I sat down on the old wooden step, cracked crown still on my head, and waited for the crying to come. Didn't at first. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired in my bones. Tired in a way that made me lean back against the wall and close my eyes. I thought about all the times I'd stayed in that room and forced myself to hold it together, because the rule was always, you can fall apart later, but you don't ruin the meal. Later usually meant curled up on the mattress in my childhood bedroom, muffling sobs into a pillow while the washing machine thumped downstairs. It meant wiping my face before coming out and acting like nothing had happened because we don't dwell. It hit me then how messed up that was. How my father had more concern for his experience of a festive meal than for his daughter's very obvious pain. How normal that had seemed to me for so long. I don't know how long I sat there before my phone buzzed in my dress pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting a message from Mom. Come back in, you're being silly. Instead, it was from my friend Lena. Surviving? Need extraction? I joked earlier that she should be on call, in case I needed to fake an emergency. Seeing her name on my screen in that moment made my throat finally ache. The tears didn't come as a dramatic flood. They just overflowed, steady and hot. My nose ran. I wiped it on the back of my hand like a teenager. I typed back, stepped outside so I didn't cry at the table. Dad told me not to. She wrote back almost immediately. Of course he did. You okay if I call? I hesitated, then hit yes. Listening to someone else's voice felt safer than sitting there alone with the echo of my father's. Hey, she said when I picked up, the clatter of pans in her background, soft music. You're doing great. I'm literally hiding by the garbage bin, I said, half laughing, half sobbing. So I don't know about great. You're not hiding, she said calmly. You're regulating. There's a difference. And you didn't cry where he could shame you for it. That's huge. I sniffed. A mosquito whined near my ear. The smell of rosemary from Mom's planter box drifted up. He told me not to dare cry, I said, the words tasting sour. Like if I did, I'd be attacking him. He can warn you all he wants, she said. You're not under his jurisdiction anymore. That word, jurisdiction, made me snort laugh, which then turned into another round of tears. I feel like I'm 12, I admitted. I stood up from the table and my whole body was waiting for him to grab my arm or something. Like I'm going to get grounded. You're 33, she reminded me gently. You can get in your car and drive away if you want. You can also go back in if you want. You have options now. That was the piece I'd been missing all these years. Options. As a kid, I had to sit at that table and take it. As an adult, I kept sitting there out of habit. And guilt and fear and a million other messy things. But the door had been open the whole time. Yeah, I said slowly. I do. We stayed on the phone for maybe 10 minutes. She didn't give a big rousing speech. Mostly she listened, made a couple of dark jokes about relatives. Has Aunt Are You Seeing Anyone started yet? / of course. And reminded me to eat something when I could. When we hung up, I felt a not fixed, but less like I was drowning alone. I sat there a bit longer until my breathing evened out. Then I did something that still scares me a little even as I type this. I went back inside, grabbed my bag from my old room, and left. I didn't make an announcement. I didn't go back to the table and give a speech about boundaries. I slipped down the hall, heart hammering, and called out a generic, just grabbing something from my car, as I passed the dining room door so no one would automatically interrogate me. Once I was in the driveway with my keys in my hand, the panic spiked. My inner voice went into overdrive. This is overreacting. You're going to devastate them. You can't drive upset. Go back, sit down, smile, you can cry later. Then another voice, quieter but steadier. Cut in. You've been driving upset your whole life. You're more stable now than you were last year when you smiled through dessert and then sobbed for an hour in a service station car park on the way home. I sat in the driver's seat for a second, fingers trembling on the wheel, and texted my mom. Hey, I'm not feeling great, so I'm heading back to mine. Thanks for dinner. Talk later. I watched the typing dots appear and disappear. Eventually, are you serious? In the middle of the meal, people will notice. I stared at the message, feeling that old shame rise. Then I put my phone face down on the passenger seat and started the car. I expected Dad to come out, to stomp down the driveway, to demand I stay. No one did. They were probably all too busy carving ham and asking my cousin about baby names. The fact that my leaving caused less actual disruption than my crying would have, that says a lot, I think. The drive back to the city was strangely quiet. No Christmas music, no talk radio, just the low hum of the engine and my own thoughts. I kept waiting for the regret to hit. Didn't. The guilt was there, sure, like an ache behind my ribs, but under it was something else. Not joy, not triumph, just space. When I got home, I kicked off my shoes in the hallway and sat on the floor with my back against the door, staring at my little fake tree in the corner. It looked a bit pathetic, crooked star, 2 mismatched strings of lights, 3 presents underneath from friends. But it was mine. No one was about to criticize my wrapping technique or tell me which order to open things in. I cried then properly, not in a dramatic movie sobbing way, just steady tears that felt like my body finally exhaling. I wasn't crying because I'd been told I couldn't. I wasn't crying because I'd failed some invisible test. I was crying because I'd finally done something different, and that is scary and relieving at the same time. Later, I microwaved some leftover pasta, opened a cheap bottle of wine, and video called Lena. She and her girlfriend were in pajamas, cheeks flushed from laughing, surrounded by wrapping paper. They waved at me through the screen like I'd just arrived at a party. "You made it out," they cheered. "I left in the middle of dinner," I said, half stunned, half proud. "I actually left." "Of course you did," Lena said. "You're not a hostage." I think that's what I wanted to get off my chest here. Not just that my dad is the kind of man who tells his grown daughter not to cry at Christmas dinner, but that it took me until 33 to fully grasp that his warnings aren't laws. I can choose where and when I let myself feel things. I can choose which rooms I sit in. I can even choose to skip Christmas with my family entirely next year if I want. I know some people reading this will think I'm overreacting. He just didn't want you to make a scene. It's one day, suck it up. If that's your gut reaction, I get it. I spent years saying the same thing to myself. But for me, that one day has always been an amplified version of the rest of the year. My emotions monitored, my reactions graded, my role in the family functioning as a sort of emotional soundproofing. This Christmas, when my dad said, "Don't you dare cry," I realized for the first time that the dare went both ways. He dared me not to cry there. I dared myself to leave instead. And honestly, I don't think I've ever given myself a better gift.